Today I'm taking a look at Kumeu River's 2023 Estate Chardonnay. 2023 was a vintage that really the weather offered winemakers some real challenges, and we were quite interested to see how the Brajkovich family had managed to deal with these and to meet the challenges that they were given. So let's have a look at the wine, shall we? See what we make of it. Where Wine Searcher are based, our closest internationally well-known winery is Kumeu River. The winery was established in the 1940s by Mick and Kate Brajkovich and their son Matty, who had emigrated in the 1930s coming from Dalmatia. The current generation, Matty's children, Michael, Paul, Milan and Marianna, have worked with their mother Melba to build the reputation of Kumeu River's Chardonnays to a level where they're certainly rated as one of New Zealand's and arguably the world's leading Chardonnays. Fairly recently, our team of wine specialists were able to visit the winery and we tasted their 2023 Chardonnays. So the challenge that was posed in 2023 came in the shape of a number of heavy rain events. For instance, on the 27th of January, a little over 10 inches of rain fell in Kumeu in less than 12 hours. A portion of the cellars flooded and a small part of the lower part of Matty's vineyard also flooded. Flooding in the area was pretty serious. I was personally cut off in Kumeu itself trying to get home and didn't make it home that night because of over knee-deep floodwaters. Further heavy rain fell a few days later. And the issue was that a month before harvest, all this humidity ensured that downy mildew took hold. Now the vineyards had been sprayed against this, but the heavy rainfall washed all that off the plants, and there was no way that they could get back into the vineyards because the clay loam soils were too wet and would have just become a muddy morass had they tried to enter with spraying equipment. What resulted from the downy mildew was widespread defoliation. In fact, some of the 6 vineyards that go to make up the estate's Chardonnay were completely defoliated, and this led to picking coming earlier than would otherwise have been seen as optimal. Picking went on entirely by hand with a very high degree of selection, and therefore the harvest was small, but they did ensure that only high quality fruit made its way into the presses. The fruit was whole bunch pressed, and a certain amount of turbidity was allowed to remain in the juice when it went into barrel. So it was fairly cloudy, and that gave nutrients for the yeasts to work on, because the fermentation was done entirely with indigenous yeasts, so those yeasts that had come in from the vineyard or were already in the winery. Fermentation took place in French oak barrels. They'd have been 228 litre Burgundy barriques. So with each barrel having its own slightly different fermentation going on, that was eventually going to give the winemakers plenty of blending options and some wonderful complexity. Now in 2023 they opted to use no new oak at all. There's normally about 15 to 20% of new oak, but instead, because it was a small harvest, that meant that the proportion of 1 and 2 year old barrels that were being used to age the wine was higher than normal, and that helped to compensate for the lack of new oak. All the wine underwent malolactic conversion to help soften the acidity by removing a portion of the tart malic acid that was there, and the wine aged in oak for 11 months, for most of that time on its lees. Viticulture here is entirely sustainable. That would make sense. Most of New Zealand's viticulture is certified as being sustainable. Looking at the colour, there's a relatively pale yellow colour. The wine only has 12.5% alcohol. It's not coming across as being particularly heavy or viscous, and I can't see any tears forming on the side of the glass at all at this stage. The aromas are refined and complex, they're elegant, they're quite delicate. Citrus of lemons, an appley note, creamy notes sort of showing the yeast lees. There's not an obvious oak note. Perhaps there's a little bit of integrated vanilla and a tiny sort of note of gingery spice there, and I suppose there's an underlying mineral note as if there are sort of wet stones there, but as I say, it's an underlying note. It's delicate. The first thing you notice is really good crisp acidity, appley sharpness, almost a tart note, but actually a weight of fruit opens up around it and turns it from being sort of harsh and tart to being sort of appley, to adding a more rounded note. There are clearly some leesy notes there. There's a little bit of creaminess on the mid palate. that is actually just beautifully integrated with the fruit. But the wine is more to the front of the mouth. It's 12.5% alcohol. The alcohol's not really showing through at all. It's perhaps not giving as much body as I might have seen from previous slightly weightier vintages. So the wine's lean, it's elegant. There's a lovely poise to it. The acidity is giving a lovely freshness to the fruit. Green apple, the beginning of the ripeness spectrum for peach. And the flavours are delicate, but they're very persistent. And the lees notes are really nicely integrated with the fruit. They're not standing out. And so this lemony note, the appley notes, with the very well integrated leesy notes, are giving a lovely, long, smooth finish. Very impressive for what is not a huge, heavy wine. It's well defined by its acidity. So what do I think of the 2023 using this as an example? I think they've done a superb job. I think if you tried this alongside any of the previous 4 vintages, it's clearly a leaner, more elegant style of wine. But it very much reflects the style of wines coming from Kumeu, and its restrained intensity, if that's not tautologist, actually suggests to me that this is a wine that would quite happily age for 4 or 5 years. It's probably not one for long-term cellaring, but in the intermediate term, I think this would continue to develop. Its acidity will keep it stable, and there's sufficient persistence of flavour that it should open up a little more and show a little bit more generous fruit. There's a lovely mouth-watering nature to the finish, and I think this wine really does show that commitment to quality in the vineyard can enable you to make high-quality wines even in really challenging conditions. And I went on to take a look at our Wine Searcher aggregated critics score for this wine, and it's getting 90 out of 100. I think that's a very fair score, and I think given the vintage conditions, one that's very impressive. I will leave a link in the notes below to this vintage of this wine on the Wine Searcher website, so you can follow that link, and first of all you can see if the wine's available in your market, what its price is, and then you can use the tabs on that page to find out more about the winemaking, the region, the producer, the grape variety. You can look at the critics' responses to it, you can see what other users have had to say, you can see any awards it's won. There's a section on price history, and there's a section relating it to the previous vintages. All the information you could possibly need to make an informed decision about buying this wine. So thank you very much for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, do please press the like button. If you would like to watch more of these videos, it would be fantastic if you would sign up and follow our channel. If you have friends you think might like to watch the video, do please pass it on to them. We'd really appreciate your endorsement in that way. Come and join us for another tasting in the very near future. Thanks again. Bye for now.